Good morning. How's everyone doing today? Awesome. So one of the songs this morning was talking about soft clay, and I thought that was appropriate for the topic this month of Spirit expressing is the freedom of choice. Because when you have a lump of clay, you literally have an infinite number of possibilities of what that clay can be and become, and all it takes is a choice. You know, what are we going to do with this clay? And so my talk today is going to be my why and choice. Basically, because we have all of these choices, we can either walk through and just sort of making decisions on a whim as those choices come up, or we can come from a place of inspiration and intentionality of, you know, why are we making these choices? Why did I decide to do this activity today? You know, why did I decide to wake up and meditate for 30 minutes instead of hitting the snooze button 3 or 4 more times? Because I like hitting the snooze button. So last week, Reverend Bonnie talked about how do I decide, and talked about some of the perspectives that Joel Goldsmith talked about as far as going within and spending some time alone to be able to figure out these different actions and different perspectives. And her example specifically was world peace, you know, and how we as a society and a consciousness, we've made many decisions throughout history ideally towards world peace, and we are where we are today, right? You can turn on the TV and observe that. So maybe it takes a new perspective and some different actions and some different words and some more intentionality to get to that place of world peace. But if we take a step back from that, and why as an individual do I want world peace? You know, and I can't answer that question for anyone else. You know, I can only look at myself and within and why I feel that's an important thing. So today I would like to get to a place where each one of us can, if we don't have that why in our life, if we don't get up every morning and have a very specific reason why we're waking up and interacting in the world and giving our talents, maybe we can walk away today with a little bit more or with an idea of how we can get to that place. So what got me thinking about this has anyone in here ever listened to TED Talks online? Yeah, I love TED Talks. They're the best. They are, for me, a great source of inspiration. And when I started thinking about this idea of choice and what I could share, it reminded me of a talk specifically about a gentleman named Simon Sinek, and his How Great Leaders Inspire Action was the name of his TED Talk. He's done multiple TED Talks, and one of the things he talks about in there is the golden circle. And basically what the golden circle is 3 circles within itself, so it looks like almost like a bullseye, with a smaller circle and a bigger one and a bigger one. And what he describes as a circle is on the outside, the biggest circle on the outside, that's the what. And pretty much everybody knows their what. You know, what they do for a living, what they're going to eat for breakfast, what activities they're involved in, you know, what they contribute to their family, how they interact and what they do with their friends. The next circle within that is the how. And so, you know, how do I do my job? How do I communicate? You know, different things like that. And many people know the how. And usually when we don't know how, we have people in our lives and in and around us that can point us in the right direction or give us tips. And the middle circle is the why. And he says his hypothesis is that not very many people know their why of how they do things and what they're doing within their lives. And one of the questions that he asks within his talk is, why do you get out of bed and why should anyone care? which is a very tough question, right? Because we believe we have all these ideas of to answer those. But really, for me, myself, when I sit down and think, why do I get out of bed and why should anyone care? I don't know if I can answer that, look someone face to face and answer that in a concise and meaningful way. So as I was researching this, one of the readings about choice from the Science of Mind on page 143 says, we cannot live a choiceless life. Every day, every moment, every second, there is a choice. If it were not so, we would not be individuals. We have the right to choose what we wish to experience. We have the right to choose the kind of companions with whom we wish to associate, to say in what city and in what type of house we would like to live. We are individuals, and the only way we can be individuals is to be spontaneous. There's no such thing as a mechanistic individuality. It must have the essential elements of spontaneity. There's no spontaneity and no individuality without prerogative. There can be no choice unless there is something from which to choose. Otherwise, the ability to choose would be merely a fantasy. Therefore, there must be not only the possibility of choice, but the liability of experiencing that which is chosen. We have a right to choose what we shall induce in mind, the way in which our thoughts are to become manifest. We cannot always see, or should we be disturbed that we do not see the way, because effect is potential and cause. I am Alpha and Omega, and all that comes between cause and effect are really one. And if we have a given cause set in motion, the effect will have to equal the cause. One is the inside and the other the outside of the same thing. A certain specific intelligent idea in mind will produce a certain specific concrete manifestation equal to itself. There is one infinite principle, one infinite thought stuff, one infinite creative power, but countless numbers of forms, which change as the specific idea behind them change. So this idea of cause and effect is very important, because if we have a very inspired cause, then that allows the effect at the end, because they're one and the same, we have this inspired outcome. And this inspired outcome, when witnessed by others, it allows that the energy level and the creativeness of those around us to also engage in that. And so today I want to talk about three things about basically how can I get to my why? How can I sit down and really produce that so that each morning when I wake up, I personally know, why am I getting out of bed today? And I can express to people why they may or may not care. Because when I have these things and these ideas and these inspirations, not everybody's going to care. Not everyone I come into contact is going to care, and that's okay. But there will be people that are interested and want to sit down and talk and look at these things and maybe take those steps within their lives. So the three things I want to talk about are inspiration, spiritual friendship, and who am I? So the first thing with inspiration, I am in the recovery world, and one of the things they talk about in the recovery world when you first come in is that you need to change people, places, and things. And because the hypothesis behind it is if you continue hanging out with the same people, going to the same places, doing the same things, that you'll just continue with the old habit or the habit that you're trying to dispose of, so to speak. And so for me, it works the same way with inspiration. Because if I continue hanging out with the same people, going to the same places, and doing the same activities, if they're not inspired or they're not inspiring me and I'm not enjoying them, then how am I going to reach that place of inspiration? And so because in recovery, it's such the way of life is probably a very damaging and unhealthy way. They usually talk about changing people, places, and things immediately. And so I'm not up here saying, oh, everyone needs to change their people, places, and things today. Like, delete your contacts in your cell phone and like find all new friends. That's definitely, that's unrealistic. But my thought is if that inspiration is not flowing through you on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a consistent basis, maybe gradually changing those people, places, and things. And so as far as people go, a lot of times when I don't really know the people that are around me, I might think that I don't know any inspiring people, which I think might be a common thought, but is probably not true. But if you really believe like, oh, all the people I encounter on a day-to-day basis are not inspiring, well, we live in a day and age where we can find out information about just about anybody, and so for me, inspiration can come from books, people that I've heard about, people I learned about during school that lived inspiring lives, and I can read autobiographies, or I can read books that were written by these people that have inspired me, or that I've heard things about that seems inspiring. Also, for me, more so than books, are documentaries. I love documentaries. When it comes to hearing stuff and visualizing stuff, I'm able to learn things a lot quicker. And so for me, documentaries is a great place to find that inspiration and to find those inspiring people within that. And then I can, through that, if I want to deepen that research, I can go to the books. And one thing that has become very popular for me recently are podcasts. And listening to those on a regular basis, because there are podcasts that are as short as 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, and there's some that are as long as 2-3 hours. And by listening to those, usually the longer ones, when it's two people conversing and having a significant conversation, though the conversation will weave and wind into areas that I was not even familiar with. I've learned some different meditation techniques or ideas around meditation through some of these conversations that I was able to go and learn more about. Back to the inspiring people, I've learned about people or ideas that people have that I was able to go back and learn more about. And then lastly, with people, I wrote here neighbors, but that's just sort of a form of anybody we come in contact with. And taking that time to connect with those people and really get to know who they are, because I'm guessing that there are people in our lives who are extremely inspirational, but we just don't know them yet. We don't know their story. We don't know the things that they've been through. And a good example for me was, I had the opportunity of my grandparents helped raise me, and it wasn't, I grew up around them, and so they were just my grandparents, and in the last year and a half, I've had a lot of time to really reflect about my grandparents and the relationship I had and the stories they've shared with me. And it really gave me a new perspective of how inspiring they were to people, and having people share with me, whether it was my grandfather giving a gentleman. I was with my grandfather one day, and a gentleman stopped us in the grocery store and said how my grandfather had given him his first job as a busboy at a restaurant, and he'd been able to make a living ever since. Or my grandmother being involved with Meals on Wheels and being able to take meals to people that otherwise might not have them, and also to have interactions with those people. And so, finding those people in our lives that we can sit down and have conversations with to be inspired. Places. For me, the beach is a great place to go and be inspired. When I was in the Navy, before I really got into any sort of ideas of spirituality, anytime I would get too stressed out or too overwhelmed, I would drop what I was doing and go to the beach. And I would go there with this idea, with this knowingness that when I got there, a peace would wash over me. And being a guy that grew up in the desert and not a lot of access to beaches growing up, it was a beautiful thing to experience. And so where are those places that bring you inspiration? And the last thing is things. What things inspire you? It can be activities, yoga, building stuff, retreats, just any sort of thing that allows us to feel more connected, more centered. And but once again, that I don't know what those things are for you. Spiritual friendship. This is one of the things that I did not realize how important it was in my life to take time out to build and allow these spiritual friendships to develop. I lived here basically 2012 through 2014, and then I went to Philadelphia for a career change. And I did not, when I was here, I was blessed enough to come across people and build these, what I now know today as spiritual friendships, where we would sit down and really grow together. And I did not cultivate those same friendships during my time in Philadelphia. And so what I know is these friendships and this what has become an important part of my life. I have to seek those out, and I have to set time aside for those things. And what does that look like for me? One of them is people that remind me of my true nature and who I am. When things are tough and I feel down and out, they can pick me up, and they can remind me of that universal spirit that's running through me. And these are also the same friends when things are going really good and I'm full of myself and flying pretty high. They can bring me back down a peg in a loving and supportive way, reminding me that this thing will pass. This very great thing that is going on will pass, and we'll still be here and love you when that happens. Like I talked about earlier with the inspiring people, but someone that I can have a significant conversation with. Someone that I can set aside some time and meet, at Spirit Winds or any coffee shop or for lunch and sit down and yes, maybe we'll discuss sports and the weather, but then we'll step aside from that, that protective mask we like to walk around with in public and talk about the real, where am I emotionally? What are the challenges in my life? What are the joys in my life? How can I be helpful to you? What's a struggle with me, and really become vulnerable. Because I feel like with these spiritual friendships and just with friendships in general, that's where the real love and helpfulness, how we can be of service to one another, really comes through in those vulnerable moments and those true conversations. Because if I'm not opening up and being honest with anybody about what's going on in my life, especially when I'm struggling with something, how then can someone step in and give me guidance, give me some help, and things of that nature. And lastly, people that I can be honest with and ask the tough questions, and vice versa. People that can be honest with me and ask me the tough questions. There's been times in my life where, because I've cultivated these friendships and these relationships, that I, have acted in a way that maybe I'm not very proud of, right? And one of my friends witnesses this, and he's pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on in your life? What's inspiring you? What's making you act in this way? That's not the Dorian I know." And just really having to drop any sort of defensiveness. Because my first reaction, right, when someone pushes me on something or tries to call me out about something, is I want to get defensive, right? And I want to justify it. Well, if you had my life, you would be doing this and X, Y, Z. But the truth is, that's not who I want to be. And because I have people in my life that are able to approach me in that way, and then I can be honest with them, and they can be honest with me, and those sorts of things have really allowed me to live in a way that I can learn why am I getting out of bed every morning, and why should someone care? Because I've attempted to surround myself with people that push me in that way, and that we build this spiritual friendship and these deep friendships, and it takes time. That's one of the things that I think gets lost in our age of Facebook, where we have thousands of friends on Facebook, but how many of them can you really come to when things are down and out? And lastly, who am I? Who am I as an individual, I think, is probably the most important thing to look at when we're trying to get to our why. What are my skills? What are my weaknesses? What brings me joy, especially within those skills? For me, a lot of those things over the years have come through writing and journaling, and putting them down in black and white, so that I can then look at them at a later time and be reminded of these things. Also for me, meditation. Meditation has been a huge part of my life over the last 8 or 9 years, and when I really am plugged in to the practice and going within and connecting in that way, that is when the most significant and inspired things have been able to flow through me, whether it's through that universe within myself, or whether it's other people approaching me and sharing information with me. And that was one of the things discussed last week with the Joel Goldsmith readings, was that idea of going within and doing that hard work of finding out who I am. And lastly, so we take all of these things, this allowing ourselves to be inspired, these deep and meaningful friendships, and finding out who I am as an individual. And I think for me, the way to bring that all together is through what businesses like to call a mission statement, and codify this in some way, in some idea. Usually we think of a mission statement as something written. But as I was thinking about this, I don't think that's how it has to look. A lot of people have other outlets of how they can express things and remind themselves of what this why might be. Some of the ideas I was able to come up with was, through poetry, writing this mission statement as a poem, drawing, art, painting, things of that nature, and also as set up as an altar, where we can come for meditation and prayer and connecting each day, and be reminded by the things on there of our true nature, of our why of our life. And this isn't something that can be created overnight. I was looking through a couple websites, and I think this is from liveboldandbloom.com, and it was specifically talking about steps of writing a mission statement. And this was the last sort of part about refining a mission statement. Creating a mission statement is not something you do in a day. It does require introspection, self-analysis, clarity of mind, and often several drafts before you produce it in a final form. It might be several weeks or even months before you feel really comfortable with your mission statement, before you feel it is complete and concise expression of your innermost values and directions. Review the personal mission statement regularly, and feel free to revise and update as you continue to ponder your values and goals. Keep it within your view so you can read it regularly. Use it as your personal framework for your life, and every time you make an important decision, let your mission statement be your guide. And I think that last sentence is what brings us back around to this idea of freedom of choice, and which is a tall responsibility, and coming and being able to make those decisions in an inspired and insightful way for who I am as an individual. Because the decisions I make on a day-to-day basis would not be the same decisions that you make. And to go back to the reading, that's what makes us an individual. You know, the being able to be spontaneous and live a life that I've envisioned for myself, you know, and to be able to communicate to others how they might be able to create a same inspired, envisioned life. And that's why I think making a mission statement into a physical form, like I was saying, whether it's written down, whether it's a drawing, a picture, an altar, or it could be anything. However you can revisit that on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and able to allow it to evolve and become truly yours. So I'll wrap with one story of my life and what's going on in my life right now. So ever since I was a little kid, I grew up loving football. It was a huge part of my life, specifically professional football. And I can remember 7, 8, 9, 10 years old every Monday morning, the first thing wanting to do is get the newspaper and get the sports section so I could look at the stats from the day before, you know, the scores and how many yards each person got. And it brought me a lot of joy as a child, and that love for football has stayed a part of my life. So 3 years ago, I got an email from NFL Films, which is a movie production company owned by the National Football League, to come work for them. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity and went. That's why I was in Philadelphia pursuing this, and loved every second of it. You know, anytime I had, most of my days were great days, but you know, sometimes when the boss was short or I felt extra pressured, I would step back and think, if I could go back and tell my 12-year-old self, hey, don't worry about it. Whatever's worrying you, whatever is stressing you out today, you're going to work for the NFL one day. So it'll be all good. You know, and even for the first couple months, every other Friday, I would log in to my bank account and check to make sure it said NFL and then plus, some amount of money, because I couldn't believe that I was getting paid to do the job I was doing. So in essence, it was a dream job. But at the end of the day, it was still a job. As I mentioned earlier, I was in the Navy, and one of the things I loved about the Navy was being able to go to other countries and experience different cultures and see the world. And in October will mark 10 years since I got out of the Navy. And one of the promises I made myself when I got out of the Navy was that I would travel. I would continue to travel, because that had become an important and significant part of my life. So October will mark 10 years. And as I stand in front of you today, I've literally been out of the country one day in those 10 years. So it dawned on me earlier this year, in probably late 2016, that I either needed to start traveling and live that promise, or I needed to stop lying to myself. Because I was being dishonest about it, because it was one of those things like, oh, I'll do that next year. I don't have the money to right now. I'll do that. I'll do that when I have the money. I kept putting it off, and it dawned on me that only I get to make that choice of whether I travel or not. So I either need to travel or just be honest with myself and look myself in the mirror and say that that's not a priority. And so about 2 months ago, I went to my boss and, with lots of, that's not true, with a little bit of fear and a little bit of possible regret, I put in my notice to quit this dream job that I had had for the last 3 years so that I could go travel. And before I went and told my boss, I made sure to do one thing. I bought a one-way ticket from Boston to Paris. Because then if I had that one-way ticket, I had to do something at that point, And so I went into my boss and told them that I was leaving at the beginning of June, and that and then without a job, then I really had to do something, right? So for me, that is an example of today of an inspired choice, living a little bit more authentic life for me, and walking into this journey that will start at the end of the month. And and the reading that my mom had at the beginning talked about removing the fear and doubt and replacing it with faith. And that's basically what my practice has been for the last several weeks leading up to this trip, and all of that has come because of the inspiration that I've engaged in over the last 10 years, the spiritual friends that I've built over that same amount of time, and doing the work of getting to know who I am and what's important to me. So I'm going to close with this. This is a reading by Mary Morrissey, and it's Life by Design, and it's from her blog, January 26, 2013. You create your life in two ways. One is out of design, and the other is out of default. If you don't design a dream for your life, then your mind will go to the default patterns of your previous thinking. You must consciously choose your directions so you know how to set your sails. The universe delights in giving you whatever The universe delights in giving you whatever dream you envision. All you have to do is choose, focus, and follow through. What are you designing for your life today? Here's to living by design. Thank you very much.